to answer your question, you also raised an interesting point. Is an ongoing process. So the culture is not like we've read it down on day one and then 2 years later it's the same and we have our manifesto and that's it. But it really needs to adapt. You know, when a company acquire other companies, then you need to merge the culture and kind of cherry pick the parts that are better for the company as a whole, and so on and so forth. And then, as Ivan knows more than I do for sure, communication is key. So once you have defined it, then if you don't cascade it down, it's not worth even starting the project.
Yeah, Eva, maybe it's a good time that you share with us what happened at A1 even before the project came to communication as a phase. So how did it start? You build a lot of, you have a public manifesto, you have the leadership principles, you've done a lot of things. So how did that happen in the group with across several countries involving the management teams and so on?
Yeah. So a lot of good points. I will get back to that later. Would love to comment some stuff that Federica said. But as we mentioned before, A1 Croatia is here on the market for 21 years. You know, and in 1999, when the company the company started with business, it was a completely different era. You know, we were the disruptors, we were the challengers on the market. We were heavily into innovation. We were truly a startup before startups. You know, in Croatia. So 20 years from that moment, we are a company with 2,000 employees. We serve more than 2 million customers. We are part of a larger group that's working in 7 countries, has more than 19,000 employees. So the technology has changed dramatically. And even we as a company, what we provided then and what we are providing now change as well. So for us, it was not about creating something completely new. As Federica said, you are who you are. You have your own values. You have your personalities. But it was more about adapting. Adapting to the new circumstances in which company is now working. So we kind of, the last 3 years were very intense because we started heavily with digital transformation. And it was a huge project internally because people were like, why are we transforming? What's digital transformation? And, how are we changing? So it was a lot about change of mindset internally. Also, before that, we acquired companies, large companies. It's something that really has effect on the culture of the company. And also we rebranded. So we were known for 18 years as, one brand on the market who stands for something. And now we are, completely other brands. So we went through really a lot. A year and a half ago, we started with the culture project on the group level. So it actually came from the top, from leadership, and it was a moment where leadership had to question themselves. Okay, are we behaving? Are our values the thing that will make us, fulfill our promise of empowering digital life? So they started from themselves, and they gathered from all the countries, and actually they looked at the surveys, they looked at what employees said, what they like about the culture, what they think should be changed or what should be better, and they looked at themselves. Do we have as leaders competencies and behaviors needed to push us forward, And this is something that we call leadership principles, but they are not leadership principles because they were actually throughout the projects co-created with employees, because all of the principles were tested with employees, and we asked them all these important questions. It was more in a range. What do you like about our culture, and you want to stay? You wanted to stay in our culture. So what is something that we have, but we should do better? and what is something that we definitely don't have and should have to fulfill our purpose, you know. And this is how the principles came alive, and they are alive now, I think, for almost a year. And we have a lot of, you know, projects that we do to kind of help them translate it and come to life. You know? So it's they decided, if you want to know, so it's invest in people, it's challenge directly with care, it's explore, try, and make it fly. It's winning together, losing together. So it's very concrete behaviors. And what I especially like in this project, and what we also do in communication, is we incorporate what behaviors are not part of our culture, you know. And I think this is also important to just paint a picture, you know, with what you do in the company and what you say. And I agree that the change has to come from the top, you know, because the leaders are the ones, and the management are the ones that, you know, we look at them and they have to, you know, walk the talk. But I also think that the culture is something that should be co-created. You know, it's not that somebody in some room is deciding, okay, this will be our culture, this is us, and then, you know, we put posters and this is our culture. So, but maybe, it's something that probably any professional in the industry of communications and culture is aware of.
Yeah, you touch upon several very important things. And my personal favorite, I will come back to the others as well, is what you mentioned, what we are and what we are not. Being brave to say what you are not. And we see that also when we do any kind of communication, when you build brands, it's always more tangible and always more believable and relevant if you really define who you are and what type of people would and should be attracted to that, and who you are not, and admitting that you cannot serve everyone or be the company for everyone. And this is fair. So maybe can you share a few examples of what you've done? I know you have a comic on that as well for internal communication, showing what not to do, but what have you done to really explain to people what A1 should not be?
Yeah. So actually, when we had, I really don't like to call it a launch of culture. I really hate that the phrase, you know, we are launching the culture project, you know, we are starting it now. But when we, let's say, launch the topic of culture more heavily in the company, we actually issued like really fun digital book, conversations with managers, you know, virtual coffee with the CEO and everything. And when we talked about the behaviors and the values and the culture, we also talked like in parallel, you know, what is opposite of challenge directly with care. We even had our managers, you know, saying, I have a problem with this and I have to work on this. And please bear with me while I work on this, because I have a tendency to challenge without care, you know. And this is something in communication. We talked with our leaders, you know, just open up about what are the competencies maybe and behaviors you are lacking. And it's more relatable because we are all humans, you know. And we issued also this comic strip we have each month. Actually, it's just maybe in Croatia we are kind of cynical, as you know, nationwide we are kind of cynical. So we didn't want to have, you know, like a situation where our culture is this, and, you know, live these values and it's good for you and everything. But we kind of created characters that are totally opposite. You know, they are not team players. They hate helping others. They are not agile. They, you know, they like status quo. You know, they like doing the things in the old-fashioned way. You know, and a bunch of these kind of crazy situations they find themselves in. And it's quite memorable, you know, and it had an impact where, you know, and it's also a testament to our culture, you know, that we choose the comic strip and we choose this openness, you know, and that may be something else. So, yeah, these are some examples.
But that's a very good topic. Federica, do you have examples like that to share? Do you also, share the belief it's important to define yes and no, both sides of the
Absolutely.
coin?
Absolutely. I always thought, it's a match that you need to create. So you need to be able to articulate who you want to have on board and how they should behave, and who you really don't want to have on board. And it's just an easier way for also the HR department to have less CVs but higher quality of those. And I think that I think it's interesting. I was reading an article on MIT's loan management review, and they were saying that out of around 700 companies they checked and they researched on, the most used values from companies were integrity, respect, and innovation. So all these companies in their website were saying we are respectful, we value integrity, and we are innovative. And I think it's the challenge is here is to be distinctive. So on one end, if you don't say we are respectful, doesn't mean that you are not respectful. But at the same time, you need to make it more closer to what it means, closer to what it means for the company. So I really like what you Eva were mentioning about the fact that it's behaviors. It's translated into behaviors. Your values. It's not just something that is really abstract up in the air, but it's something concrete that I can understand. Am I doing it or am I not doing it? So am I compliant or not compliant? Compliant is not even the right word, but am I behaving in a way that is, let's say, aligned with the culture of other people? And in this sense, the example that I like is Facebook, because when they talk about innovation, they don't say, we innovate or we are innovators. They say we move fast and we break things. So this is how we innovate. And on one end, not every company can do that. So imagine a pharma company, they can say, you know what, we break everything we've done, all the research, and we start from scratch. No. And on the other end, it also tells me if I'm the right person. So am I the right person for this kind of culture? Or do I need to think and stop and reflect and then maybe change and then talk to people and then again think and then maybe change? So it works both ways. So it works for me to tell me, this is this company and it's not another company, and for me to understand, am I the right person for this place? So I mean, this is the fascinating piece. Make it work for your company, and don't be afraid, not to have the checklist of respect, innovation, and integrity, because if it's not there, doesn't mean that you're not, but it's not who you really are and what makes you different from another company.
Yeah, so true. And change is not easy. It's not easy for people, for us as individuals. It's always a stress to start something new or change the way you lived so far. So for companies that are big organisms, it's even more cumbersome and tough sometimes, and it's natural. And I think you both mentioned it. It's honesty is very important, so that people can admit if it's not easy. They can admit that it's not a habit they possess today. So it's all human and it's fair to work on it, as long as we know why we are doing it. So I think that's very true.
And if I can add on what Eva was saying, of course, it needs to start from the top. It needs to be embraced from the leaders, but it doesn't just need to involve them. Because imagine, how bad it would be if the leaders, as you were mentioning, Eva, sat in a room, then they decide, okay, respect, integrity, and innovation. We have all of them. Let's put them out. And then people read those and are like, okay, what does this mean? It's like, are we really that innovative? And how, in which sense? So it really needs to go hand by hand, and you can admit, you're not there yet. And I think especially after these months that we have lived now, we are more prone to admit that we don't know the answer. We want to be pioneers again. Okay, how do we do this? Let's think about it together. It doesn't have the CEO saying, okay, this is how we're going to do it, but it's more of a collaborative process, because it needs to feel real and credible from the inside and from the outside as well.
Yeah, I would add an example. When you mentioned Google, one of our culture principle is explore, try, and make it fly. And so maybe 20 years ago, we truly were, as I mentioned, disruptors, challengers, and a lot of things were new. So you didn't have a different way of learning than maybe sometimes, you make a mistake, you move on, you learn from it. But in 20 years, we at one point were more like, okay, let's test it. And when it's perfect, we put it on the market. And at one point, people lost the feeling of it's okay, to fail, and it's okay to not know everything, and it's okay to try, and that it's not perfect. So, for example, when we started with digital transformation, this is something that we detected, and it's something that we detected that we want that you know, the part of our culture is that people are free to make mistakes, you know, and that we are supporting them, that they learn from them, and that they move on, you know. So just one example, it was a project that we did in 2017, I think. We called it digital, after work, how to say it? It's like a bad word, F up afternoons. Like, do you understand me? Yeah. So we shared our, you know, failures.
Biggest, yeah.
Yes, with burgers and beers. We had managers there, you know, we had people working on different projects, and it's something that we did on a quarterly basis. And I remember when we said that we are doing this, it was like, what? We are having an event with beer and with, you know, burgers, and we will talk about our mistakes, you know. But it was just a way to kind of get their attention. And I have to say, like 2 years, it took us, I think 2, 3 years now. I see people like, it's okay, let's do it, let's try it, and then let's move on. But it took some quite time to kind of change, to shift that way of thinking, you know. Yeah, so it was kind of interesting to hear Google, and it's probably, you know, yes, it's part of their culture, but for us, it was not, but we wanted that behavior to be a part of our culture, because technology is changing so fast in this digital era. You don't have the luxury to, you know, plan perfectly and execute, you know, a project for a year time, because the market already changed in that period. You have to move fast, you know, you have to try and see what works, you know. So it was very important for us that the culture change and the mindset of the people changes in this way. So this event is just one example. We had a lot of course, other stuff we were doing, but yeah, so.
It's a good example, and I like the fact. Yeah, sorry.
I wanted to add another example. There are just too many things that I'd like to share, and the conversation is just so interesting. I'm talking about failures, and I love the story about, you know, the reaction of people that were like, okay, why are we doing this? What are we doing here? But talking about failure, I think another story that can help us reflect about how important they are, how much, you know, actually company values matter, is the Boeing, the American company. So as you have read in the news, there were few planes actually that crashed. And one of the reasons why they realized this happened was also because of the company culture, because it was a culture that was very much results driven. We need to, you know, we really need to reach our deadline, we need to perform, and there was no time to really stop, raise the hand and say, I don't think this is going to work, I don't think this is going to work properly. And, you know, and this happened for many people. So, you know, at every stage of the process of a production of an airplane that I imagine is very long and big, people were realizing there were things that were not properly working. So, you know, multiply this by 100 or 1,000, and then you see, you know, the effort that this can have. So this tells you how important it is to have a culture where it's okay to open up, raise your hand and say, you know, boss, I don't think this is gonna work, or, you know, let's try and see if there are other ways to make this better. And even if we miss the deadline, then, you know, it's about people's safety in that case, but no, it's about the company as a whole. In all the other cases, you can apply this example to as in other companies. So I found this very, let's say, interesting in a way, explaining the CEO why this is important, why we need to work. You know, it doesn't always happen, the plane crash, that's good, but this gives you an idea of the impact that it might have.
Yeah, not being afraid of failure, because it's, I think, an integral part of experimentation. So in order to learn, you have to have something failing. It's also a proof point, you know, of what doesn't work. So that's also good. And I think what you mentioned, Eva, in this digital world with all the industries that are very much into it, they need to experiment. So it's inevitable, definitely.
Yeah.
And it's also important to link, I think, the values and the culture with where you're going and the strategy, as you also mentioned. And maybe this is a good time where I can invite our colleague Ivana, who is our People Operations Director, to join, because we as a company also are in this year, in the very big year of changing our strategy, the course, expanding the portfolio, changing the identity, basically. So a part of that was also redesigning the value set. And I think it's interesting maybe to share some of our experiences of how that was done, involving people, how, you know, that was linked to strategy. So what is a way to link the values you want to design with where you're going? So I don't know if Ivana is able to
Hello.
unmute. And hi, Ivana, great.
Yeah. Hi, Dina. Hi, everyone. Hi, Federica and Diva, and welcome. We are really happy to have you. I'm enjoying the discussion. I think that the topic of values and even linking values with a strategy is, you know, an exhaustible source of inspiration for, I would say, for all of us. I'm truly enjoying the examples you're sharing with us, and thank you. Dina, thanks for the question. Actually, how we did it, I will maybe briefly share, you know, to let Eva and Federica know how we did it, just to share an experience. But then I would love to focus maybe on the link between values and actually the strategy and the importance of it. So I think that we agree that the change must come from the top, and we are happy that we have support, you know, in delivering that change, in you know, pushing the change, motivate, etc., etc. How we did it, we actually wanted people to participate. We somehow let our employees to choose the team of core values ambassadors, you know, which are the one who are maybe the best representatives of their teams, to be a project team who will participate in the core values definition. So this is how every single employee could impact the team who is going to participate in delivering and defining those kind of core values. And then we had somehow the management filter that will make us sure that we are going aligned with the strategy. So I suppose that this is how we agree, and you know, that change is definitely coming from the top, that everyone should participate, you know, that everyone should, I mean, at the end of the day, agree or identify himself or herself with the values, you know, to be able to live them on a daily basis. So I would just love to maybe stress the importance of linking them with a strategy. I mean, when we say the strategy or the vision, how I see it is, you know, is something that is common purpose, right? Our common goal is the direction we want to follow or the destination we want to reach. So the strategy is actually the what, right? what we want to achieve, where we want to go, and why core values are important is the thing that core values are the how of the what, right? So what do we want to achieve, where we want to, you know, what is the destination we want to reach, but how we want to do it. And I mean, as in life, as in both personal and professional lives, it's not important only what we do. It's very, very important how we do, you know, how we approach the things, how we approach everything we do. So I think that how is actually what makes our work meaningful. It's actually what makes our work inspiring. It's actually something that is letting us, you know, learn, make a mistake, learn, then grow. It's not the strategy that is teaching you. It's not a strategy that is that you could learn from. It's the daily execution of the strategy that is teaching you, you know. It's how you do it, and you are learning from it. So this is actually that makes us growing, learning, improving. I mean, at the end of the day, shining, right? So what does it mean in practice? I totally agree that, you know, it may sound simple. You know, you're treating the core values topic, and you can post it on the wall on a poster like Eva and Federica shared, you know, and this is it. I mean, we know we have 5 values and this is it. I mean, that's only the beginning. And I think that when we are talking about the link between values and the strategy, that link will exist only in case everything we do on a daily basis will be, you know, if core values will be visible and reflected in everything we do on a daily basis. I think that this is the key. And Centili, I mean, is in a specific moment now. Ladies, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but we are now going through transformation, both, I mean, business transformation, organizational transformation, and of course, cultural transformation, right? I mean, we expect culture to change. In my opinion, what does it mean, culture to change and to support the strategy? You know, if you expect culture to change, then there is, I mean, every single aspect of organization for sure needs a refreshment or a change. And this is what we are now going through, you know. I mean, you cannot stay the same and expect things to change, right? So we are going through, you know, change of hiring, of leadership, change of organizational structure, I don't know, performance management, incentives. I mean, it's a huge change on all the levels of the organization. And I think that only after those kind of deep changes, after those kind of deep shifts, we can expect our behavior to change, right? Employees' behavior to change. And then the culture change will come as a consequence, as a result, I would say, right? So this is the moment in which I believe values start providing guidance, you know, on expected outcomes. What is actually the execution of the strategy, right? So this is how I see it, and this is, I truly believe that makes organizations, you know, successful and efficient. That kind of link between the strategy and values is truly crucial. Yeah, so this is my opinion and our experience on it.
Thank you. And maybe you started the next big kind of half of this topic, which is how to implement the values, and what does that really mean? How to walk the talk. So maybe Federica, you can tell us some of the companies that you believe are doing it right. What does it mean? I know that some companies do it through changing the hiring process or the way they promote employees, or have some initiatives and promotion and recognition mechanisms, definition of high potentials, and so on. What do you think works best?
This is a good question and full of potential answers. But I think starting from the experience that we've just heard about, and really congratulations for the big work you're going through. But I like the idea of values as, you know, the framework or the fil rouge, what connects everything that a person experiences when he or she gets in touch with the company. So from, you know, being an external person that reads about the company, and then starting with throughout the whole application journey, the candidate experience, and then the employee experience. So really everything needs to be coherent and needs to be validated. Like, is this compliant? Is this in line with what our values are? And this being said, I also think that, you know, values should work as compass, meaning that I really like the word compass, because it's like, I'm about to make a decision. Is this actually aligned with our values? Is this something that I should do? And in a way, this has the great potential of empowering people, because every person in the organization can be able to then make a decision, of course, depending on the decision, but on her own, because she knows what is good and what is not for that company. But going back to your question, how do you make it real? How do you walk the talk? I think this is very much connected. So in every moment, you need to make sure that what you're saying and what you're doing is really in line with the values. So let's start with the external communication of the company as an employer and as the business. Is it what we are saying, the words that we are using, are they aligned with what we want to be, what we are? And then starting also with the assessment of the candidate. You know, companies are starting to assess the candidate based on the value, how much they are, let's say, aligned with the value of the company. And to be honest, and this is something that you, Dina, were mentioning at the very beginning, young generations, they want a company which has the same personality as theirs. So I don't want to join a company where I need to be someone else in order to fit in, because this is not the kind of life that I want to live, because work is an important part of our life at the end of the day. So really this match between my values and the company's values is very important. There was a LinkedIn survey recently, and they said, you know, people are actually willing to have a lower pay in order to have a company that has values that really match theirs. So this is definitely one thing. And then the other thing that I think it's important to keep in mind in this sense is also assessing people performance based on values. So it's not just how much you reach your business objective, so the what that we were mentioning before, but also how you get there. So in a way, you know, if it's a the sales team, then you don't reward the person that gets the highest target, but you reward the one that gets the highest target in the right way, because you know this is how we treat our customer, this is how we deal with them. And then last but not least, I want to bring the example of Spotify. I've had the chance to listen to the head of people and culture. And again, it's interesting that it's called head of people and culture, not head of human resources. And he said, you know, we hire for cultural add and not fit. And I think this is beautiful, because definitely you need to hire people that have the same values. But if you hire people that all thinks the same, then innovation doesn't happen, you know, because it's like, okay, we all agree with each other, there's no out of the box thinking, and that won't move the company forward. So cultural add, that's the way, because you need people that have the same values, value the same things, but at the same time are able to bring something different that is gonna, you know, kind of push the discussion a bit forward. And then of course, you know, if you hire for a cultural add, then you need to have a culture internally that is able to listen to a person that is bringing a new perspective, because otherwise he's gonna run away very, very fast. So really it's about, you know, showing what your promises are and then keep the promises, and being humble enough and to say, you know, okay, we are not there yet, but this is what we want to be. Just to give you last example, and then I promise I'll give the floor to someone else, but I could talk about this forever. Diversity and inclusion is a big topic these days. You know, many companies are talking about diversity, and you know, diversity can have many definitions. And I think it's very much country based. So in the US, you know, it has tons of definition. In other countries, very much still women and men. And when you talk about diversity and how to build an inclusive workplace, I think it all starts with your culture. So there are some culture where they say, you know, we don't even have quotas, or we don't even talk about this, because, you know, we have a respectful environment, and, you know, we respect differences. We respect you for who you are. Also because, last comment here, the new generation, they see diversity as my own personality. I'm different because I'm myself. So that's, you know, this goes beyond every kind of label we have managed to give to diversity in the past years. So I hope this answers your question.
Oh, yeah. And maybe, Eva, you can add on to that by maybe sharing a few examples of what you concretely did when cascading your values and the principles within the organization. You were very much involved in that. What worked well?
Yeah. Well, it was just really a mix of communications and projects that our people and culture team developed. They are also called people and culture in A1. It was just a lot of different approaches. I liked what Federica said. It's like more of things kind of make a circle, and then it's a whole. But if I were to give, you know, people and culture examples, yeah, we have the how and the values in the performance management system. So when you are evaluated, it's not only based on your results, it's also how did you get those results. And you know, we also launched an app, a mobile app, because, you know, trust and team are something that we value, and we wanted to celebrate each other. So we have an app where you can praise another employee based on the values. So you can say, oh, you know, thanks, Mark, you really helped me with this project. You really invest in people. You know, or if you have a situation where somebody was really innovative and helped you, you know, you can say, yeah, you really explore and, you know, try things, and thank you, you know, I'm better with you. And we actually then have awards for these employees, and we have a video each month where they, on the one hand, the employees who praised others said, this is why I give them the compliment, and the ones, you know, that receive the compliment, they say, you know, thanks, and get the award. We have stuff, you know, like this. We have also for example, when we say we are agile, you know, at the beginning, it was okay. What is agile? How are we agile? You know, and then when company started invested heavily into agile and explaining what it is and what's the process in front of us, and you know what we are not currently, it really started to shift. So how did we cascade this through projects? So we formed Digital Academy, where people, like more than 500 people, was educated on the topics of agile, of Scrum Masters, of design thinking. We also formed more than 20 agile teams. We open up new positions. Now we have Scrum Masters. You know, 3 years ago, we didn't have these positions at all. We had project managers. Now we have, you know, Scrum Masters, product owners, agile teams. And really what I love is that after 3 years of this kind of different projects and communicating meetups on this topic, you know, managers, they have really great education, agile leadership, you know, because we wanted to include, of course, them as well. Now, after 3 years, I see that teams who are not agile teams, they really work on agile methodology. So they have daily stand-ups, they work in sprints, they have Kanban, you know, boards in their offices. So it's really, you know, just for me, it has to be a good balance of communication and the walking the talk. And the projects that company stands behind, so it can live in the company, you know. And I would just, I want to really refer on this topic, you know, that I think it's really important from the preparation. I think this crisis and this pandemic, you know, it truly put a spotlight on the companies, on their culture and on their values. And I think what the companies did now is something that their employees will remember for a long time, because it hit them on the emotional level. So there is no way you can fake who you are in the time of crisis. So, you know, ask yourselves, what did you do during the crisis? You know, how did you behave? Did you talk to your employees? You know, like we in internal communications, we say, you know, that trust is very important part of our culture. You know, this openness and ability to talk with each other and to help each other, and the care for employees. You know, we heavily, like, we focus on 3 main areas. One was communicate. Like, you cannot over communicate in the time of crisis. Secondly, we said, you know, we will show with our actions we care for employees. So we were very flexible to parents. We, for example, also said to all people who has chronic disease, you don't have to work and we will give you the full salary. You know, it was just the way we wanted to show that we care. We also gave bonuses and extra mile bonuses for extra mile they gave us in the pandemic, you know. So we didn't want to save in the crisis, we wanted to support them. And third of all, we really invested heavily into educating managers, because sometimes I feel, you know, when I talk to people, everyone is like, you know, middle management is the problem. You know, when we are cascading things, it stops on the middle management. But you have to ask yourself, what are you doing to help managers to fulfill their role? You know, so we've heavily focused on, okay, this is the tips and tricks you can use with managing your remote team, because a lot of them, like, for the first time you find yourself in a position you are, you know, working with your team that's completely remote. They are very stressed, they are anxious. Okay, these are the tools that will help you to recognize the stress within your team, and this is how you can work through it. These are the tools you can work to have the positive atmosphere in your teams, you know. So education of the management was heavily in focus, you know, because we wanted to enable them to be the most supportive leaders to their teams in these times of crisis. So these were kind of the three main pillars in the pandemic. So I think it's very interesting to hear also your experiences, about this spotlight on the culture in the time of the pandemic.
Exactly. It's good you brought it up. I mean, does it really help us reinforce the culture if you behave right? Like you mentioned, some good examples of how the company steps up to really be their best self. Or does it endanger the culture and the values because people are not together? So definitely some initiatives you cannot do, some activities have to stop and wait for some better times. So I don't know what's your first impression, but I mean, it's a question maybe for both. Did it help in terms of building culture, or does it make it harder?
What I would say, is that definitely a crisis is a moment of truth. So you cannot lie anymore. If you were mentioning, if you had on the wall the word respect, but if you're not respectful of your people, then the crisis will, make it even more evident. So you cannot escape from that. So I really agree with what Eva was mentioning before. And what I say, of course, being remote, it's not easy because, being together and sharing spaces and looking at other people, how they behave, it's a way to express culture and to learn from each other. But I still think that from what we heard from companies, because one big concern from companies at the beginning was, shall we communicate? So shall we expose ourselves in a moment in which people are living a very tough moment personally, maybe. And I really echo what Eva was mentioning. Is like, there's not such thing as too much communication, especially if it's done in an authentic way, genuine way, and you recognize that you don't have all the answers again, and you can but you are there for your people. And we interviewed employees, and some of them said, the company didn't ask me how I was feeling. How are you? Maybe they set up a mindfulness path, or an online yoga class, but they didn't ask their people, how are you? So at the end of the day, I think we are humans, and we have basic human needs, such as make sure that people are there for us. And I think that there are other ways that you can show your people that you care about them. So companies have shipped to the people homes a better chair for you to sit, so you don't have to sit on your kitchen chair while you're working. Or they've organized team meetings. Of course, it's not the same, but I also think, from what we heard from companies and from employees, that some teams were closer than ever, because we were all living the same situation. Especially imagine globally, no matter if you're sitting in Germany, in the US, in Croatia, in Italy, we are all seated at home. So you have definitely you have something to talk about to break the ice. So how's the situation in your country? Are you allowed to go out and have dinner at a restaurant? And then last but not least, the fact that we were all living the same situation, and that we were at home, really made the conversation in a way closer, because we have been inviting people in our living room or in our kitchen for months now. And I was reading a comment from a BCG manager, and she said, I heard employees saying they trust more their managers, they respect them more because they've seen them as human, because they've seen kids running behind them, or the cat or the dog or whatever. So I think that being remote is definitely an obstacle, but it shouldn't be an excuse, because you can easily find ways to really keep the company close and build the culture and reinforce it. One last comment, and I promise then I'll give the microphone back to you, Dina, about the circle. So Eva, you were mentioning this is a circle. The values are a circle, and I will emphasize that too, because even if the person leaves the company, you still need to be able to be true to that person, because they might be a client, they might become customers in the future, and they might join the company back, and they will definitely talk about the company they've left. So being true to every single employee, no matter at which stage of the journey they are, it's definitely important now more than ever, but it is important, definitely.
Yeah.
You're right. And I mean, you sparked so many ideas in my head. I would now have so many more questions. I'm just mindful of the time. I wanted to add one more thing, not to make it too simple. So COVID brought some complexity to our lives, definitely. But there is another element that builds complexity. It's nice, but it's not easy to manage. And this is going global. And I wanted to touch up on that quickly. When you want to expand from a country to 2, 3, or 10 in the future, it's much harder. When you want to go to different geographies, so you're not just operating in one region, but in a completely different part of the world, that makes it much harder because you need to really blend the local cultures with what you want to build as your own. And you have to be very clever around what you do. And this is a point where I wanted to invite Monica from Infobip, because she's their employer branding lead. And I think Infobip is present, if I'm not mistaken, in more than 60 countries right now. So I guess it has been a party doing that. So Monica, if you can briefly maybe join us just to comment on what you have done to create this unique Infobip character across the world.
Thank you, Dina. And hello, everyone, and hello, friends. It's really nice to see you here. And voila, surprise. Well, I'm really happy to be here. And I was listening to everything. And I'm really so happy that we are talking about this topic and that we have like a really nice understanding of what it is, because it's really, really important. And then going back to Dina, your question, yes, definitely. I think when I started working on the topic, people were mostly confused, but how do you create like one culture? It's almost impossible. You have now we have 70 offices all around the world. We have 6 continents. We are growing really fast, which also means that we are hiring a lot of people. So for example, our growth rate has been 30 to 40% year over year. So just in 1 year, we were in a situation where we could easily say, okay, so every second person in Infobip is new. So that can also strain the culture a little bit. And of course, there are a lot of elements that we need to put in place for all of it to work, going back to the circles and the spirals of, having the core values really, really well defined, or at least make them part of as many activities as you can, because it's in everything that we do. It's from how we say hello when we come to the office, to basically how we are doing some of our processes, to how we are in the end talking to people and communicating within the company. So it's like almost the spice that goes to everything. And when it comes to different cultures, we have to be very aware that on some level, we cannot make it like one unique culture. That's not possible. And it goes back to what Federica was mentioning about the culture add mentality. When you start by trying to kind of assimilate different cultures, make people feel, the same, it's not going to work, especially today with the shift that we see with younger generations, with their identity and this really, really big focus on values. Like people are not going to work for companies if they don't really believe in what the company stands for. So I think it goes in 2 levels. How I see it as happening is that basically what we do in Infobip is we have to be very clear on the core values, because that's basically the glue that ties the whole company together. But then culture is more about behaviors and norms and expectations of people and how we behave. And that can vary, although we have the same core values. So it's about like having something that kind of connects all of us, that everyone can relate to and say, okay, yes, I'm really, really passionate, or I'm really, really disruptive in some cases, or humble, but how I show it in my culture, in my office, with the people I work with, or my family, or people I like, and or my friends, can be a little bit different. And this is then part how we try to respect these differences in culture, where we see that people sometimes behave in a different way, but it's all kind of tied to the same core value. And that's why we always say that, at least in HR as well, we don't insist on having one culture. So we have also saying here many cultures, but one Infobip experience, meaning that what we try to work on is the experience that people have in the company, because that's basically the part where we have most, let's say, control. With culture, it's not one person, it's all of us together, and we cannot really control it, right? It's a live element. It's up to all the people in the company. So you don't control it. You are aware of what it is, but you cannot control it. So the part that you can control is basically the experience that people have in the company. I hope that helps. I'm also trying to be short, although it's my favorite topic, and I could also talk like forever and for hours.
I think we need to book another session. I have so
yes,
many
definitely.
more
Please do. This is really interesting. Yes.
Thank you so much. Definitely, yeah. I will maybe invite, just because we've reached the full hour, just the people that are here listening to us, if they have any questions to ask. Maybe it's a good opportunity to use the last few minutes. I'm sure they might have some questions. So if anybody wants, just unmute yourself and ask any of our guests.
Hi.
Hi,
Yes.
Martina.
Yes, me again. Maybe just a quick question. I was a bit intrigued when you touched on the communication. So of course, especially us working in communications, we tend to assume that there's never too much communication. But around culture and values, can there be such a thing as over communicating it to people and then maybe producing some counter effects? So Eva mentioned before putting posters on the wall and doing just this and maybe blasting some messages at people. So I'm sure there needs to be some good and healthy and reasonable methodology involved in planning these things, because I think it's could be quite a slippery slope if you're not attentive about how you do it. So maybe just to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I love it actually. So thank you for bringing this up. When talking about communication about culture, I think it is that you can over communicate culture, because culture is more about living it, than talking about it. So when I say you cannot over communicate in the crisis, it's about your behavior. It's about you, for example, giving the right information to employees. What's the situation in the company? What's going on with the results? What's going on with the strategy, the ritual coffee, the TV shows that we had, the emails each week, these are the project, everything's fine, or something is not fine, But when we talk about culture, what our strategy was, and I'm referring again, we don't like to say launch of the culture, It was more about explaining to people, okay, this is where we want to be. This is how we can get there. This is how we will help, all of you. But it's not that we then focus on about talking about culture. We were more focused, let's create projects that are a mirror of our culture. It was more about that than about talking about it. But we also talked about it, I think, more while creating the values and the behaviors. That was, for example, the part where you have to talk about it a lot. It's about what employees say and what the leadership say. But when we kind of said, okay, we shake hands, this is our agreement, this is something that we believe in, it's more about doing it and be true to it than about talking. It's not the point. We had a situation, I remember 2-3 years ago. So once a year we have a strategy hour, and all the leaders actually are presenting what's going on with the company to the employees. And then one member of the board asked somebody in the public, do you know what's our vision, and do you know what our values, So it's not, I think it's not about that people has to know it by heart, and to recite it. It's more about, to live it. And we are in the position in communications, working with management and working with people and culture closely, just to be mindful of our core values and the behaviors we want to promote, and just kind of be the guardian of it. And also, on the other hand, to always listen to the employees. What's the heartbeat of the company at this moment? To ask them how are they, and is everything okay? So very good question. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend talking about culture in that way.
Or doing just talking, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we had Zoran raising his hand. I don't know, Zoran, if you wanted to ask also a question.
Yes. Hi, hi guys. Hope you can hear me. Thank you. Great to have you. And it was quite exciting listening to different experiences and different outcomes of this process. Correct, because this topic, it's so broad and it's so wide, and and it's obviously different for different maturity and the stage of the company and size of the company and everything else that comes through. I wanted to seek your opinion and maybe just your views on an upside down approach on values and on culture. Example would be something that maybe we see in companies like AWS or Amazon, that has kind of shifted away from what we traditionally see, correct, and say, okay, let's go through this process and define what 4 or 5 certain themes are, and then we're gonna drive somehow this culture from top down, expecting that people will change their behavior or basically align to something that a specific expectation is. And they kind of stepped away from this and said, listen, we're gonna set certain we're gonna give the freedom to the employees, and we let them excel in what do best. We're just going to be very specific of what we want them to do, maybe even in a repeated manner. And then that starts to create a bottom-up approach of what the culture in a company is all about. Because our brain has a hard time distinguishing things that the brain is told to do versus what you actually end up really doing, or what you really do every day, and so forth. And then there's a conflict continuously happening in our minds when a core value says this, but you actually end up repeatedly doing something else, and they never meet. So there's this concept that forget about this top-down story. Let's see if there's a possibility to build it from within. I'm not saying there's a right or wrong answer. I'm just curious to hear maybe some of your views behind that. Thanks for taking my question, Dina.
Can I jump in? Okay, you go, Federica. No, I'm sorry, I will have to go in a couple of minutes, so thank you very much for having me. But I just wanted to say that culture cannot be top-down, values cannot be top-down, so they can come from, usually when we talk about values, there are different levels, and we've seen some of them being mentioned. So we have like the bottom layer that are like the core values. We have then some permission to perform values that are more broad and can differ in different departments, regions, even, different segments of business. And then we have these aspirational ones, like what do we want to have in the future to get to where we want to get. And then there's the whole pack of like really accidental things that, every employee has and brings on board, because of course we are much more than just the core values of our company. We are more complex than that. But it's not like you can just push something top down and say, okay, this is going to work, and we are now all going to be super passionate about technology. It's more about being honest of who you are, and how you see yourself. For me, one of the best examples that I've heard was actually Ferrero Rocher. So what they did is they came and they said, okay, we are a family company, and for us, family is a value. And what they meant by that is basically, if you are really, really ambitious on the market, like a go-getter, and you want to achieve high results, this is probably not the best place to be, okay? So they didn't say you have to be like that, or you don't need to be like that. They simply say, this is who we are. And you can, see if this really relates to you, and do you want to be part of that kind of company? Because obviously, it's like Federica mentioned, it's not going to be for everyone. So basically what they did by being really true and honest is created this. They've attracted a lot of people, but they've also detracted a lot of people, right? Because there were people who couldn't recognize themselves in like being in a family company. That's not for me. So in the end, they might have received even less applications in terms of hiring, but they were probably high quality, because people who really saw family, okay, this is a company for me, I'm not a goal-getter, they would join. So it's not more about being top-down or going bottom-up. And of course, there's a lot of process when we are creating the whole culture deck and how we do it in either HR, employer branding, to get to the point where we want to be. But it's not one or the other. They have to live together. So even in the process, when we are building something, we are building it together with our employees to get their feedback, to test, like, how does this sound to you? Like, do you see us as such, or do you think we're something completely else? Because what would happen, and we've seen that happen in some other examples, in CEOs, coming, having like the shiny brand presentations. Okay, these are our values, and people in the audience were like, wait, what do you mean? Like, that's not us. We're not innovative, or we're not. So you get a boomerang, and people will actually start to distrust you because you are telling them something that they personally know is not true for them. So in employer branding, that's not the effect you want to have. You want them to actually relate. So on some level, it's like a good balance. It's almost like a game that you need to play to balance out like where you started from and what kind of comes from the grounds of the company, and usually starts with the founders, and they are not going to change. And then you have to balance it out with everybody who are the employees. And of course, over the process of time, you will probably lose some people and you will gain some new people. But the basic is to be authentic with who you are. And that's basically, I mean, it sounds, when I say it like that, it sounds like really simple. You just have to be authentic, right? But it's not. It's like a lot of layers and a lot of work and a lot of steps, which Eva and Federica know very well. But it's all about being authentic, at least for me.
Thank you.
I fully agree with you, Monica, and I would also add that it's important to explain why. So why our value is to be, winning and losing together. Why do we say so? What's the end goal? What are we reaching if we are all, winning and losing together? So it's really involving them and empowering them to understand why we're asking them to behave in a certain way. And it's not just because the CEO wants it, but because we know that this is going to contribute to the bigger and the end goal, and it's linked at the end of the day to business results.
Thank you. And thank you, Monica. I don't know if you have to leave us now, so thank you very much for joining if you leave before we end it. And I see another raised hand from Nina, so let's have that question as well before we close.
All right. Hello, everybody. I wanted to ask anyone who'd like to answer this question. It's about I'm wondering about how often a company should reassess the values and what would be the a life cycle of values. Because, for example, you have a company that's now employs 50 people or something, and then you come up with a set of values to create a culture. And then in a few years, most of those people are, off. They're not there anymore and new people are coming, but you're still reinforcing the values that the previous set of people have set as what they want. So I was wondering, who owns these values? Who is in charge of redesigning them or reassessing or questioning them from time to time? How big this cycle should be?
I don't know, Federica, do you want to maybe answer if you had experience with
Sure, this is indeed a great question. I would say, on one end, there are big shocks happening at the company. So we have acquired a new company. As you mentioned, we had a high turnover. So the people we have in the company are new. So that's the moment to reassess it. At the same time, I see it more of an ongoing process. So we need to, calibrate and see if they're still relevant. So, you have many occasions to talk to people, being through a survey. So to really see if things have changed, so maybe we need to rephrase a value, not just change it completely to make it more tangible and more relevant for the situation we're living now. And who is the owner? I think, again, it should be owned by the leadership just because it already gives a very much important sense of how important it is if it's the leadership, taking the lead on this. But then again, I think it's a shared responsibility between communication, HR, and marketing to make it tangible, because at the end of the day, we are communicating one single company, no matter if we're talking to employees, to stakeholders, or to external customers. So I would say these two, who owns the change in the value themselves, and who owns then the cascading down throughout the company. Hope this answers your question.
Great, thanks.
And I guess there must be a difference between companies with private owners who carry some of the DNA with them, right? Who founded maybe the company, like you mentioned, this family company example, and companies that maybe grow to be very large or go public. And then you have different changes in management that also kind of bring new winds into the company from time to time. So it's a different battle always. Thank you. And Ivana, you are raising your hands.
Yeah, it's me again. Yeah, I have a question. I would love to hear some, piece of advice. Maybe, you both mentioned, and I think that Federica highlighted that, you know, while there is a cultural transformation, something that yesterday was relevant becomes today maybe totally irrelevant, right? So then we can talk about maybe you know, resistance to something new. You know, the people may fear, you know, maybe scared of something new. And what Dina said also, okay, admit that it is not easy, you know. So maybe you can share some, maybe maybe some mistakes or failures or challenges you were facing as we are truly in a specific moment going through, I mean, the transformation of every single aspect, you know. So maybe you can share some learning points or some advice in terms of, you know, how to reduce that kind of resistance, because it's not the cultural transformation, it's business transformation, products, you know, verticals, portfolio that it is expanding, you know, tools that are being used. I mean, it's the transformation in every single aspect. So maybe if you can share just briefly some kind of advice, you know, how to acceptance, how to have higher acceptance rate or reduce, you know, the resistance to the change, because it's difficult. I mean, it's not easy. We all know it. So yeah, this is my last point and question. Sorry.
Jumping on this question, because unfortunately I need to leave to join another meeting. So this will be my last answer, but then I'm curious to hear the recording to see what other people have said. I would say one thing, and I know it's a bit stretched, but it's thinking about talent and potential rather than thinking about roles. So if you hire and train people and engage them, thinking about what they can become in the company, not just within a job role, a job family, but really their potential. So what makes them tick, what makes them excited. And it's really very much connected to what you were mentioning before. The values are the how, what makes us excited, what makes us grow. So really have this idea of, you know, things are gonna change and we are gonna help you change with things, so that you can express your potential. So, you know, maybe if your role won't exist anymore in 10 years time, but it doesn't matter, because we're not thinking about roles, we're thinking about your potential. That's my 2 cents here.
Yeah.
And I want to say thank you very much. It's been a great conversation, really. I could talk about this forever. And it's been a pleasure to meet you here. And really, if there's any question even offline, I'm very happy to take it and to continue the conversation. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Federica. It was a pleasure having you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, I have to also leave now.
Yeah, we'll have to wrap it up,
Eva.
unfortunately, but I will organize a follow-up. It's definitely
Yeah.
a theme that inspires a lot of questions and interest.
Yeah, but just for transformation, really quick, I think especially on this scale, it's to give it time, because value and some new direction will not happen overnight. And we saw it in A1 with our transformation. So after 2-3 years, I would say now we are completely, you know, okay, we are really on a good track. But it took us long and hard work, you know, to explain, to educate, to implement, to find ourselves, you know, in this. And the second advice, so the first advice would be patience, and the second advice would definitely be don't forget what we did. For example, we communicated, we had like monthly meetups on these different topics of digital transformation for our employees. And in parallel, we talked with managers, but I think not enough. We concluded it was not enough. So what happened is that employees understood, but managers didn't maybe, you know, didn't have a clear picture what is their role in the process, you know. So I think in any transformation, in any change of mindset, get them on board, you know, and say to them what help is expected from them, but please give them the tools also. I'm coming back to the experience, you know, it's not, you know, the middle management is to blame. It's okay, the management has their role, but other departments in the company also have their role to help the management through that, you know, because you as an employee, you will get the information about transformation from the company, from the CEO, from the founders, but you will go and talk about it with your manager. You will say, hey, you know, can you explain to me what's our role in like all this crazy stuff that's happening, transformation and everything, you know, and that manager should be able to, you know, explain to you, to help you, to be supportive of you, you know. So that would be my second advice: work with the management, you know, and they will help you push through, but give them the tools also.
Thank you. Thank you a lot.
Thanks, everyone. And Eva, a special thanks to you for joining us today, really. It's been a pleasure. I unfortunately have to wrap the session up because all of you have other meetings. It's still an ongoing Friday. But I do think we should definitely catch up and have another session and follow up on some of the topics, because I think everybody really honestly feels interested about it, and we do have a lot of questions. So thank you for taking the time. Thank you from all of us at Centili for joining.
Thank you so much for inviting me, really, and to wanted to hear about A1 Croatia experiences. So
definitely. I think it's a good company to learn from, and you are definitely a great expert to have. So I hope we'll meet in the future. And thanks, Martina, and everybody for great questions, and everybody who joined us today. So we'll post a recording later on so people can follow and catch up maybe if they missed some parts. And we'll definitely be in touch more on this topic. It deserves it for sure.